Hi, my name's Ian Golden, and this is How I Play. I just got back from a season of DJing in Ibiza at the Enter Party with Richie Houghton. And there I was really exploring the idea of integrating controllerism, or really manipulating the music and trying to find a place for it inside of house and techno. Because it's all about the groove out there. So you don't want to break the groove, but you want to do really interesting things that the audience can enjoy and recognize. So I want to show you the setup that I ended up settling on and developed over my time in Ibiza this summer, and hopefully maybe you'll take some ideas away from it to incorporate into your own rig at home. So of course the very core of it is the DJM 900 Nexus. I like the Nexus because it's got one USB connection and that goes straight to my computer. I use the yellow chroma cable so I know this is my audio, don't mess with that. And then I've got 4 independent channels coming from Tractor straight into the Nexus on each of these channels. So I'm mixing on the mixer and I can bring these channels in or out right here on this guy. Then the next most important part of the whole setup, of course, are my decks. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 decks using 2 of the X1 Mark I's, which I like because I have these extra 2 encoders. And so we'll just get a little beat rolling here. And you notice I got some custom feedback going there from the LEDs. There's an article on djtechtools.com on how to do that. We'll link to that below. And then next to it, of course, I've got Deck D, but Deck D is really driven by the twister and these drum machines. So what I've got going on here are where I do all my live sequencing. So I've got a little hi-hat pattern going here with, looks like an effect. We can add a little snare. And one thing that I like to do is route some of these Tractor effects only onto specific things, like the snare, or maybe on this hat. And let's actually do a different sound. So that's pretty common. I like to have a nice, steady, backbeat hi-hat, and I'll keep this going through most of my set. So even if I'm going into a different part of the track, I've got this hi-hat going, so I can kind of manipulate it. And that I'm actually manipulating using the peak filter. If I really want to, get a little extra beat, I'll maybe program a kick to support the low end there. So now I have that nice kick, which I can mute or bring back in, or maybe change it up, do a little breakbeat thing. Or go back to a 4/4. Okay, let's bring down that hat. Okay, so those are 2 of my 4 decks, and now let's go on to some of the other decks. Right next to the twister, I've got the MIDI Fighter 3D, and this is one of my favorite new additions. The MIDI Fighter 3D is actually triggering a bunch of samples here in this remix deck on the 4th page. So the twister is sequencing drum hits from the first 3 pages, and then on the 4th page, I've got a bunch of sounds that this guy is triggering. And if I use the motion control and route the effects to that sound, I can make some really interesting textures. And so I really like that because just in the middle of a set, I can pop in little elements and just add a little flavor, which is really great for techno. Just reach over and do maybe a little, snare fill. So even though the twister is already sequencing a snare on that track, So the twister's sending out a note and it's firing off a snare. I can kind of overdub snares on top of it in the same channel. And so I can either have that dry or route it to effects. And let's go ahead and put like a little reverb on that. So I'll just do these little fills. Now, if I want to make this whole thing really chunky and I have enough room in my DJ bag, I will bring these guys over here. These are some Boss pedals, and I like to use the send returns on the mixer to route them just onto my sequenced beats. So if you remember, I've got my 3 voices over here. Maybe we can add a 4th. All right, so we've got a nice little mix of drums there, but sometimes it's really helpful to kind of punch them and glue them together. And for that, I love this compressor sustainer. So let's just turn that on, and you immediately hear everything's just super, super tight. Add a little reverb, and you've got a really cool sound. I use the DD3 delay because it gets really sideways. Because it's not really timed. So if I've got that going over a beat, pitch bend that guy a little bit. Let's get another song going. Let's use this guy. All right, so if we've got all of our tracks going, or at this point I've got 2 tracks and the twister going, he's sequencing some beats, and then I've got my compressor sustainer on top of that to really make those beats punch through. So listen to the difference. This is without the sustainer. It kind of sits in the background, which can be nice, but if I want a really forward techno sound, I'll throw on that compressor, and then everything just kind of really punches through. Turn it down a little bit and bring it back. And then if I want to make it a little bit more organic, I'll add the DD3. And so those are those 3 controllers. And as you heard there, I really like to use, when I need just a little extra flourish, I like to bring in these guys. Okay, so of course you have to listen to your mix, and I use these Westone in-ear monitors. These are the dual drivers, not the triples. I find they're really, really good, and these are essential for me to save my ears because I can't really DJ that much anymore because I lost a lot of hearing. I've got tinnitus, so I try to save as much as I can and DJ as little. But these allow me to really play gigs. And one thing that I've been experimenting and using on stage lately has been the Subpack backpack. This is really cool because I'll throw it on my back, strap this guy to my waist, route the headphone output into here, and then my in-ears up to my ears, of course, directly from here. And this adds the kick and the bass that I'm missing with the in-ears, giving me a really, really full monitoring experience. I'm a little bit more disconnected from the audience, but man, in terms of really hearing the mix, especially when I'm doing this level of detail, it just can't be beat. You know, it's like really listening on some beautiful near-field studio monitors. So my left X1, I have, of course, 2 more decks. And typically I'll have 2 main decks for songs and then 1 deck for kind of drums. So even though I've always got 4 decks rolling, usually I'll pick the middle 2 for my main songs, and then I'll use the right one for my drums over here that I'm sequencing or playing on top. and then I'll use the left one for loops and stuff. And I like to take little snippets of those loops and repeat them to give me some, some little, kind of techno flavor. So let's bring that guy in. So of course the beat masher is great for this. Maybe a little bit of reverb. This is great for a little bit of a build. Maybe a little filter. And that way I've got a lot of stuff to play with. And that was the main thing that I kind of arrived at with this whole setup was, giving myself a lot of little things to kind of play with that would sound really good without completely overwhelming the mix. Definitely one of my favorites are popping in samples on the MIDI Fighter 3D from the remix deck in the fourth. And then if I have the room, and bringing these guitar pedals gives the whole mix this really interesting analog sound that punches through. So that's pretty much it. The only other thing I've got in my setup are a pair of chroma cables here. I've got all 4 of these controllers on one USB output. It's pretty amazing. And I've used the chroma cables ties to kind of tie this cable together like a snake. So that makes the whole setup really easy. I just throw this whole thing in my bag, pull it out, plug in my controllers, and I'm ready to play in just a couple of minutes, even with all this gear. So that's it, folks. That is how I play, and you are watching DJ Tech Tools.